Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mr. B. We are discussing the latest development in the Iran war. Is Trump losing the Iran war? This is dragging longer and longer. And even though Trump has successfully put a blockade, it doesn't seem like Iran's coming to the table, and it's dragging out, and cost of everything is continuing to rise. So the longer this delays, is this causing a stain on Trump's legacy? Let's see. We're going to go ahead and play a clip from First Post. They're an Indian-based media company that pretty much, for the most part, tells it down the middle, splits it down the middle. They're not pro-U.S. or pro the other side. They just kind of report the news as we would expect it. And unfortunately, our media doesn't necessarily do that. So they're a point of reference in terms of keeping up with the latest development on this. With that said, let's jump right into it.
Can US President Donald Trump force Iran into a deal? Or is Tehran simply buying time while holding on to its biggest pressure point, Hormuz? That's the question we're asking tonight, because for days we've been hearing that a deal is close. But how close are they really? Because Iran refuses to drop its nuclear ambitions, it still has leverage over Hormuz. Meanwhile, the more this drags on, the more the pressure grows on Trump because none of his war objectives have been met. So is he running out of leverage? Here's why I asked this question. Today, Trump posted on Truth Social that a deal with Iran would either be great and meaningful or there would be no deal. Earlier, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is currently on a visit to India, suggested an agreement could be reached within hours, triggering a sharp drop in global oil prices. Despite the enthusiasm being shown by the United States, Iran says a deal is actually not close. Meanwhile, Iranian top negotiator Ghalibaf and Foreign Minister Araghchi are now in Doha to meet Qatar's Prime Minister over potential US-Iran deal. Trump has demanded Saudi Arabia, Qatar sign Abraham Accords as part of the Iran peace deal, amid efforts by several countries to formally end the Iran war drag on. China's Xi Jinping also met with Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in Beijing today. The high-level meeting followed Sharif's talks earlier in the day with Premier Li Qiang, China's number 2 leader. Still, it has been 3 months since the US attacked the Islamic Republic, triggering this war. And 3 months later, Iran's grip on the Strait of Hormuz, its resistance to nuclear concessions, and its theocratic government largely intact. Iran has also maintained its uranium stockpile. It is believed that it remains buried and could be recovered and further processed to make a nuclear bomb. And it is one of the key sticking points on the talks right now. Iran says it wants the United States to recognize its right to enrich that uranium. Meanwhile, Trump's repeated claims of complete victory ring hollow, as Washington and Tehran teeter between diplomacy and Trump's on-again, off-again threats to resume strikes. If that happens, it would draw Iranian retaliation across West Asia. So now, more than ever, Trump is at risk of seeing America and its Gulf Arab allies emerge from the war worse off, while Iran could end up with greater leverage. It has already shown the world that it can throttle 1/5 of the world's oil and gas supplies. For Trump, the optics of it all matters. He wants the world to think he is a master deal maker. He's sensitive to being perceived as a loser. It's an insult that he's often lobbed at his opponents. But after the Iran war, he finds himself the commander-in-chief of the world's mightiest military, pitted against Iran, which seemingly has convinced the world that it has the upper hand. Simply put, he's in a predicament, and that could be a problem for America. Because Trump, who is yet to define a clear endgame for this war, could resist any compromise that looks like a retreat from his maximalist demands. It could also mean that he could end up repeating the 2015 Obama-era nuclear deal with Iran. Yes, the very same deal that he scrapped in his first term. Already there are signs that Trump is frustrated with his inability to control the narrative. He's torn into critics, he has accused the media of treason, And the conflict also has lasted twice the maximum 6-week time frame that Trump laid out when he joined Israel in starting this war on the 28th of February. Yes, at the outset, American airstrikes were successful in reducing Iran's ballistic missile stockpile. Also, yes, US killed many Iranian top leaders, but Tehran has responded in kind by blocking the Strait of Hormuz, which has sent energy prices soaring across the world, and by attacking Israel and Gulf neighbors, putting more pressure on America to end this conflict. Trump then ordered a blockade of Iran's ports, but that has also failed to bend Tehran to his will. Iran's leaders have matched Trump's claims with their own propaganda, depicting his campaign as a crushing defeat. The war was designed to be a short term for Trump. Instead, it has turned into what looks like a long-term strategic failure. Remember, Trump had campaigned for a second term in power by promising no wars. He's done the opposite. He brought the United States into an entanglement that could result in lasting damage to his credibility, both at home and abroad. And this at a time when he faces domestic pressure over high gas prices, low approval ratings, as his Republican Party struggles to maintain control of Congress. As a result, more than 6 weeks into a ceasefire, Trump faces a stark choice to either accept a potentially flawed deal as an off-ramp or escalate militarily and risk an even longer crisis. One possibility is that if diplomacy collapses, Trump could launch a round of sharp but limited strikes, frame it as a final victory, move on. Another possibility is that Trump could attempt to shift focus to Cuba, as he has many times over the course of the past 3 months suggested. This he could do in hopes of changing the subject and trying to score a potentially easier win. Could Trump do it though? Could an escalation help US break the deadlock? We don't know yet. But here's where things stand. 3 months later, Trump still has no clear victory, no clear endgame, and no deal. Iran remains standing. America's alliances are strained, and its rivals are taking notes. So I ask, who is really winning in this war?
Imagine being
As you can see, some valid points were raised. Donald Trump got himself in a conundrum. It's hard for him to simply say he won because the conflict hasn't ended. And there's still a shortage of oil. There's still high prices. There's still a cost that's affecting the general public. And the longer it drags out, even though there's not active bombings right now, this conflict is having a real effect on our economy. And it has caused Donald Trump to lose some credibility. And the longer it drags out, the more damage I think he does to his reputation and to his credibility. Now, I want to see the president, succeed in his endeavors, but the way he's going about it is not likely to yield the result that I think he would want. So I don't know that it benefits him to continue to drag this whole conflict out. I think it benefits him to find an exit ramp and to kind of save face, because this isn't going to result in him getting exactly what he wants. Even if he was to say, get Iran and tap out, those people are very prideful people. And if we were to ever, put boots on the ground to try to force our will, impose our will onto their people, I think they would fight us for eternity, right? And that will always be a stain on his record. So I don't know that this was a wise decision for him. And yes, he may eventually try to deflect by redirecting his attention and his resources to a new conflict with Cuba, which seems likely to happen. Not that that's going to be hard for us to take over that particular place, but it just further will put a stain on how he's going about handling his business. Again, I don't believe that this lends to helping him, cement a good reputation as, a prestigious leader within the U.S. I think, he's done a lot that people give him credit for, but his foreign policy, especially when it results in us engaging in wars and having to pay for pointless wars, I don't think that helps his credibility with the people. Now, we're going to see how it all plays out with the midterms. I know there's been some recent developments that there was some runoff open seats, I believe, in Florida, and the Democrats won. I don't know if that's indicative of what's going to happen in the midterms, but, you know, this better not lead to a major shift in support, because if it does, Trump is not in a good place. All right.
In a city that doesn't sprawl outwards, it shoots straight, a razor sharp, no clear. It shoots. Now imagine a city that doesn't sprawl outwards. It shoots straight, a razor sharp line slicing through the desert. Just towers of mirrored glass rising higher than the clouds, housing people inside, in what is essentially one impossibly long building. Sounds unreal, almost like science fiction. Except this was supposed to be reality. Saudi Arabia's crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, didn't just dream big. He dreamed cinematically. And for a few years, the world watched, unsure whether to be dazzled or to be deeply skeptical. Today, we have an answer, and it's complicated. In 2016, Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS as the world likes to call him, unveiled Vision 2030. The pitch was audacious. Take a kingdom swimming in oil money and use it to build a future without oil. Spare $1 trillion from Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, which is a giant national investment fund owned by the government, to construct cities of tomorrow. Attract foreign investment, create jobs, and put Saudi Arabia on the global map. Not just as an oil state. Fast forward to today, 4 years away from 2030, and that dream is being quietly dismantled. I'll get to the reasons later, but first, let me tell you about the flagship of this ambition, a $500 billion mega project. It's called NEOM. And inside it, smaller projects like the Line, Trojena, the Cube, each one more spectacular than the last, each one more expensive than ordinary imagination. The most famous project under the NEOM project is the Line. Picture this. You draw a line and stretch it into a straight line across the Saudi desert in the Tabuk province. Now make it taller than the Eiffel Tower, bordered by 500-meter high walls and 170 kilometers long. That's the distance from London to Birmingham. That's the distance from Mumbai to Pune. And 9 million people were meant to live inside it. It was supposed to have no cars, no streets, no sprawl. Just 2 parallel towers of glass and steel. Visually, it was unlike anything ever proposed in human history. The engineering challenges alone were staggering. And the question nobody could quite answer was, why would anyone want to live inside a 170-kilometer corridor? Today, reports suggest the project may be scaled back to just a few kilometers of actual construction.
Regarding the NEOM project system, given NEOM's importance, as I mentioned earlier, it is a major global economic zone. Now, has there been any acceleration or cancellation? This question has been repeated a lot. I can answer now and say no project in NEOM has been cancelled. Has anything been postponed? Certainly, yes. Why? Some projects have been delayed because they are not on the critical path. There is no critical impact.
Then comes Trojena, in Saudi Arabia's Hijaz Mountains. It actually snows there occasionally. The Saudis saw an opportunity. What if we built a year-round mountain ski resort here? Slopes, chalets, a man-made lake, luxury hotels. The same Marids in Arabia. But it was even set to host the Asian Winter Games in 2029. which would have been a genuinely remarkable moment, a ski competition in Saudi Arabia. The world would have taken notice. Instead, the games have been quietly handed to Kazakhstan. Trojena still exists on paper, but the ambition has been clipped. Then there's the cube that I mentioned, or what's locally called the Muqab. This was supposed to be a gigantic cube-shaped building planned for Riyadh. So vast it could contain the Empire State Building not once, not twice, but 20 times over. A city block reimagined as a single vertical object, housing offices, apartments, and amenities on a scale never attempted. Price tag, an estimated $50 billion. Its fate, cancelled entirely. And finally, there's Live Golf. Saudi Arabia spent around $5 billion to create a rival golf tour to the PGA. It's the biggest and most prestigious golf competition system in the world. The kingdom tried to poach the world's biggest names in the game, hosting glitzy tournaments, trying to buy its way into the mainstream. The strategy was familiar: sports as soft power. But Live never quite landed. Experts believe the hugely expensive dud brought neither a financial nor a reputational return for the country. The project's main backer, Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, is set to pull its funding entirely after the 2026 season. So what happened? Why were all of these ambitious projects either scaled back or cancelled entirely? First is the matter of money. Oil prices crashed before the West Asia conflict flared up, and even Saudi Arabia's extraordinary wealth isn't infinite. Foreign investment, the lifeblood of these projects desperately needed, never showed up in the volumes Crown Prince MBS had bet on. When you're asking private investors to fund a $500 billion city in the desert with no existing population, no transport links, and no proven demand, it turns out they do hesitate. In 2017, the Crown Prince also ordered the mass detention of elite officials and businessmen in Riyadh's Ritz-Carlton Hotel. The Saudi government said it was a crackdown on corruption. Critics called it a shakedown. Foreign investors typically steer clear of countries where rules feel less stable and unpredictable. On top of all of this, there's the Iran war. The conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran sent shockwaves through the entire Gulf region. Tourism strategies, commercial ambitions, the UAE's model of being the world's hub, all of it is now clouded in uncertainty. And Saudi Arabia did not just try to copy that model, it wanted to beat it. Finally, there's the oldest problem in the book. When grand visions collide with reality, Saudi's Economic Cities program was launched in mid-2000s. It was an attempt to diversify the economy, but the project largely flopped. The crown jewel of that program, King Abdullah Economic City on the Red Sea coast of north of Jeddah, cost $100 billion. It exists today, but the goal of it is becoming a business and tourism hub hasn't materialized. But calling this a collapse would be too simplistic. Some projects which are less sci-fi in nature are quietly succeeding. Al-Ula, Saudi Arabia's ancient archaeological gem in the north, is being developed into a genuine world-class cultural destination. The remodeling and revival of the old capital, Diriyah, in Riyadh is also underway. And so is the massive state-of-the-art theme park, Six Flags Qiddiya City. So is this a recalibration or is this a retreat? It's probably both. MBS bit off more than any country could chew, spent billions on spectacle that generated headlines, but hardly any returns, and now faces the unglamorous task of managing expectations.
Okay, in the last story, what you're starting to see is the effects of the war taking place. Obviously, for a country like Saudi Arabia, who had an abundance of money, they wanted to build cities and just become a destination hub for the world's rich to come and, establish a presence in. Now, with the war happening and them not being able to sell their oil, lot of these projects comes under pressure and comes into question because is what they're trying to build sustainable? You know, in one case, they were building literally a city essentially in a glass house the size of the Eiffel Tower. It's very ambitious, and it would have been great if they can do it, but you know, real world events are taking place, and unfortunately it's not as simple as it may seem. So you know, the world's having real world effects, and you're starting to see that with some of the you know, projects that our allies have going on. All right, moving on to the next story.
Let's now talk about the other war. I'm talking about the war in Ukraine. Russia has carried out one of its biggest attacks on Kyiv in months. Missiles and drones filled the sky over Ukrainian capital yesterday. Explosions shook the city through the night. But this strike stood out for one reason. Moscow used a deadly missile. It's called the Oreshnik. It is a nuclear-capable missile that Russia says is extremely hard to intercept. And it has only been used a handful of times during this war. The attack has now raised fears of further escalation. Russia has warned foreign diplomats and international staff to leave Kyiv as it prepares for more strikes on the city. Our next report tells you more.
Just after 1 a.m. on Sunday, Kyiv's night sky exploded into flashes of fire. Missiles tore across the horizon. Air defense guns thundered back. Smoke rose over apartment blocks, and terrified residents rushed underground as explosions shook the Ukrainian capital for hours. But this was not an ordinary barrage, because Russia had unleashed one of its rarest weapons, the Oreshnik missile. It's a nuclear-capable ballistic missile that Moscow claims cannot be intercepted. The strike formed part of one of the largest aerial assaults on Kyiv since the war began more than 4 years ago in 2022. Ukraine says Russia launched around 90 missiles and 600 drones overnight.
3 Russian missiles against a water supply facility. Russian President Vladimir Putin burned down a market. He damaged dozens of residential buildings, several ordinary schools, and he launched his Oreshnik against Bila Tserkva. They're unhinged.
Officials say at least 4 people were killed. Nearly 100 others were wounded. Schools were damaged. Markets burned down. Homes were shattered. And emergency crews spent the morning digging through rubble across the city.
It's impossible. How can we go on living? How to explain to Putin that he should try to put an end to all this aggression against our Ukrainian people? For what and for which?
So what exactly is the Oreshnik? The name comes from the Russian word for hazelnut tree. Moscow describes it as a next-generation intermediate-range ballistic missile. Its reported range stretches between 3,000 and 5,500 kilometers. That gives it the ability to strike targets across much of Europe. The missile reportedly travels at Mach 10. That's roughly 10 times the speed of sound. Russia also claims existing air defense systems cannot stop it. Military analysts say the missile does travel at hypersonic speeds, but unlike highly maneuverable hypersonic weapons, it follows a more predictable path. Even then, its extreme speed leaves very little reaction time for defenders. The Oreshnik can also carry nuclear warheads. Russia says no nuclear payload was used in this strike. Still, the missile's nuclear capability alone makes its deployment highly significant. Moscow first used the weapon in 2024 against the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. This is only the 3rd known time it has been fired during the war, and this time the target was near Kyiv itself. Analysts believe the missile may have also released dozens of smaller submunitions before impact. That allows a wider strike area on the ground.
Listen, it's called Connect Team, and it's insane. I don't do schedules or timesheets manually anymore.
And it works?
Oh, like you wouldn't believe it.
Main target of this Russian attack. Putin can't even pronounce the word hooray properly. He's slurring his words, and yet he's still winning against residential buildings with his missiles.
European leaders reacted quickly. French President Emmanuel Macron called the strike an escalation. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz described it as reckless. And European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen accused the Kremlin of targeting civilians out of desperation. In fact, some foreign envoys also paid their respects to victims of the strike in Kyiv.
So, of course, today our thoughts are with the Ukrainian authorities and with victims and the Ukrainian population. But as you can see around me, actually, normal people are working normally here today. It's a way to demonstrate resilience, and I think it's extremely important that we, around the world, we would support it.
Moscow says the barrage was retaliation for recent Ukrainian drone attacks inside Russian-controlled territory. Kyiv denies targeting civilians. Besides, Russia also insists its strikes hit military infrastructure. Both sides are saying what they always say, but the weapons being used are no longer what they were. Both sides are reaching for their most advanced arsenals, a missile that travels at hypersonic speed, 600 drones in a single night. After more than 4 years of war, the conflict is not winding down, it's escalating in ways that are becoming harder to contain.
For more than a century, behind giant trees, colonial architecture, polished silverware, and an impossible waiting list, there stood one of Delhi's most powerful symbols of privilege. I am talking about the Delhi Gymkhana Club, where one lifetime may not be enough to get a membership, a place where network matters more than merit, where entry into the club means entry into Delhi's most exclusive power circles. And today, that world faces eviction, because the Indian government has ordered the Delhi Gymkhana Club to vacate its sprawling 27-acre Safdarjung Road premises within 2 weeks. Officially, this is about land and national security. The government says that the land is urgently required for strengthening defense and security infrastructure. This club is located near several high security establishments, including the Prime Minister's residence. The centre invoked Clause 4 of the lease agreement, allowing it to reclaim the property for public use. There is also the matter of years of internal disputes, financial irregularity allegations, and governance concerns linked to the club. In fact, in 2022, the National Company Law Tribunal allowed government intervention into the club's management after concerns were raised over how its affairs were being handled. Now the matter has reached the Delhi High Court, where members are challenging this eviction order. Those who have associations with the club.
Okay, as you can see, the last story has to do with the conflict that's happening between Ukraine and Russia. Russia has not really used a lot of their advanced weaponry to handle the matter with Ukraine. We're going on probably getting closer to 5 years since that conflict has been in action. And they have not begun to really scratch the surface of their military capabilities. But they displayed the effectiveness of one of their weapons that the Ukrainian defenses could not stop. The hypersonic missiles was effective at causing a lot of damage, but I think that was meant to send a message to all the NATO European leaders who maybe thought that Russia had been depleted in capabilities given how long this war has dragged out. And Russia's showing them that, look, you know, we've really been using kid gloves on Ukraine. Now, you know, you got the leader over there of Ukraine trying to curry favor when the resources are already depleted. So that being said, I don't know that if Russia continues to escalate it in this same fashion, that Ukraine will be able to sustain it. And if I was a betting man, I would guess that Russia will continue to deploy those missiles to end that conflict once and for all, and would dare NATO to actually do something about it. Because really and truly, they're not exactly in Trump's greatest favors right now, right? He doesn't feel like they came to help him. So if Russia intensified his efforts against them in Ukraine, I don't think that Trump's going to go out of his way to reallocate resources over to Ukraine. I just don't see it. So actually, it would be in Russia's advantage to actually do that, just to force Trump to decide how he's going to allocate his resources. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if this was a coordinated thing, where now countries are now taking a more aggressive approach in their own regional conflicts, to force the U.S. to pick a side and to determine how they're going to do things. So that could be, a tactic that's being used by Russia, Iran, and others to put the U.S. in a corner. So hard to tell. Well, that's it for us today. Thank you guys for joining us. If you have not liked and subscribed and stayed connected to the show, please feel free to do so by liking and subscribe this video. Also, leave your comments. We welcome your feedback. We obviously care about your point of view, so share it. It might bring some, enlightening point of views to our viewers who are essentially, tapped into these conversations. All right, guys, thanks again for your time. Till we speak again, God bless.